Don't celebrate too early when they come back. Because avoidants don't return because they miss you. They come back because the distance woke up feelings they've spent years avoiding. Have you seen it before? The moment you stop texting, stop trying, stop explaining, they suddenly come back. Soft, subtle, without ever saying why. It's not magic, it's psychology. It's what happens when someone who used to control everything suddenly loses control. And if you don't understand what's actually happening inside the avoidance mind, you'll fall into the same trap again. They pull away, you chase, they come back, you hope, and then you hurt. In this video, I'll break down 7 deep psychological triggers that make avoidance come back when you stop chasing. Not so you can manipulate them, but so you can understand what they really feel when you go silent. Why silence is more addictive than affection, and what it is about you that keeps pulling them in. If you've ever been stuck in an unclear relationship, if you felt emotionally stretched every time they got close, then disappeared again, this is the video you can't afford to skip. Subscribe to this channel if you're on a journey to understand avoidant attachment and want to love with clarity, calm, and self-worth. And stay until the end, because what you're about to learn won't just change how you see them, it'll change how you protect your heart and love. Silence forces avoidants to face their interrupted inner world. What makes avoidants come back isn't you, it's how they react to your absence. It may sound ironic. Avoidants are known to fear closeness, avoid intimacy, and protect their independence at all costs. But that's only the surface. Underneath, they often carry unresolved attachment wounds, usually formed in early childhood, where they learn to self-protect by emotionally shutting down. So when you're the one who's consistent, present, and emotionally available, they don't reject you outright. They slowly retreat in silence. That's their familiar defense. Closeness equals danger, says their nervous system. Stay back. But when you finally stop reaching out, no more chasing, explaining, or initiating what happens. There's no one left to avoid. Before, they were reacting to you. Now that you're gone, they're left with themselves, and for avoidance, this is where the discomfort begins. Silence isn't peace, it's a mirror. When you go silent, they don't think, okay, this person doesn't need me anymore. They think, what's happening? There are no signals to decode, no messages to filter, no drama to react to. And that's what avoidants hate most. Emotional ambiguity within themselves. In psychology, this is called internal affective disruption, the experience of confronting feelings you don't yet have the emotional tools to name or regulate. Avoidants often didn't grow up in environments that helped them identify and process emotion. So when left alone with their own confusion, they start to feel, why am I thinking about them? Why do I feel off? I'm not in love, so why is this bothering me? And in that haze of vague anxiety, they come back not for love, but to escape their own lack of control. Avoidants don't come back because you're special. They come back because you're familiar. Their return is rarely a sign of transformation. It's more often about regaining emotional equilibrium. You were the switch that helped them feel like they had control. Now it's off, and they're spiraling. That spinning isn't romance. It's what happens when their attachment system breaks rhythm, when the person they subconsciously thought they controlled is suddenly silent. So what should you do? Don't confuse a return with commitment. Avoidants often reach back because something got triggered, and they don't know how to resolve it except by pulling you back into the dance. They may text you something vague, ask a distant question, like a story, and if you respond too quickly, their anxiety calms and they disappear again. Not out of cruelty, but because their avoidance system has been reassured. So it retreats. But if you stay calm, grounded, and hold the boundary, they're left to face themselves maybe for the first time. And in that moment, if they're emotionally ready, healing can begin. If not, you just spared yourself another cycle of hope, disappointment, and self-abandonment. 2. Distance gives them space, but also triggers them. One of the biggest illusions when loving an avoidant is thinking, they need space, so I'll step back to give them comfort. Oh, sounds reasonable, right? But what you don't realize is even that comfort becomes threatening to them. Avoidants believe they want distance. They're convinced they feel safer when no one gets too close. But that only works when they're the ones creating the distance, when they're in control of how much intimacy to allow. When you are the one who withdraws, you remove their sense of control, And that's when something deeper gets triggered, something they thought they had buried. At first, yes, they feel relief. Finally, no more pressure, no more emotional closeness to manage. But then the silence lingers. A day without your text, a week without updates, a month where your presence seems to have vanished from their world. And suddenly, they run into something they can't explain logically, a growing feeling of being abandoned. You see, avoidants don't actually feel peaceful in space. They only feel safe when they're the one choosing the distance. When you step back, the tables turn, and that quiet peace starts to feel like emotional danger. It's subtle, it's quiet, but it's loud inside them. I don't need anyone, so why does something feel wrong? Their mind begins to twist. They want you to come back, but they don't want to be the one who asks. This is the trap. They can't allow themselves to admit they want connection. They fear appearing weak, needy, or exposed. But beneath the surface, they're watching you silently, checking if you still care, hoping you'll send some kind of signal so they can respond without reaching out first. You might see them like your story, reply to an old message with one word, or post something cryptic they hope you'll see. That's not a game. That's a nervous system in quiet distress, too proud to admit it's distressed. Here's the paradox. They only feel safe again when you move closer. But if you do, they pull away, because now you're too close. So the space you created isn't just a void, it becomes their emotional testing ground. You're doing nothing, and yet their internal system is still reacting. Why do I feel left behind even though I asked for this? That's why avoidants come back. Not because you're their soulmate, but because the absence you left challenged the one thing they thought they controlled: the ability to manage closeness on their own terms. And avoidance, at its root, has always been about control. They lost the person who quietly reflected their sense of worth. Avoidantly attached individuals often live in an emotional world where external validation is something they crave but don't dare to ask for. They don't openly express their need to be seen, chosen, or affirmed. But that doesn't mean the need isn't there. In fact, it runs deep. They simply wait for that validation to come to them, as if needing it were shameful, and silence is a safer disguise than vulnerability. And then you came along, patient, present, unpressuring. You didn't just give affection, you offered something subtler, a silent confirmation that they mattered, even when they gave you little in return. Every time you texted first, every time you checked in even when they went cold, every time you stayed when they pushed, they said nothing, but they noticed. It fed them, quietly. You became a mirror, gently and consistently reflecting one message: you're still worth choosing even if you haven't chosen me yet. But then you stopped. No accusations, no drama. You just stopped showing up first. And for an avoidant, that wasn't just the loss of a connection, it was the loss of a place where they quietly measured their self-worth. The silence you left behind wasn't loud, but it triggered a subtle, nagging question. Am I still someone worth waiting for? They can't name the feeling, because it's not burning passion. It's not the urge to reunite. It's the slow brewing fear that says, if even the one who was most patient with me has stopped choosing me, who else will? That's why they come back. Not because they suddenly realized you were the one, but because they're scared that no one else will ever see them as worthy the way you did. 4. Time doesn't make them forget, it makes them confused. Here's a paradox about avoidantly attached people. They don't process emotions by facing them, they deal with emotions by delaying them. Even when something inside feels unfinished, they try to detach with logic, distractions, busyness, or simply ignoring. So when you disappear, they believe they're moving on. But in truth, they're just sealing the lid on their emotions the way they always do. Yet feelings don't vanish just because we avoid them. They're like fermentation, quiet, invisible, but transforming under pressure. And then all it takes is a trigger, a message you no longer send, a story you stop watching, a familiar place from the past, and the sealed feelings begin to rise. Avoidants don't know what to do with emotions that erupt like that, because these feelings have no clear name. It's not love, not longing, not regret. It's just discomfort. They begin to wonder, why am I still thinking about them? I didn't feel anything too deep back then, why does it feel strange now? If I didn't need them, why do I feel unsettled when they're gone? And this is where time, the very thing they thought would bring clarity, becomes the thing that muddies the waters. Unlabeled feelings are unresolved feelings, and the brain has a strange habit. What's not clearly closed tends to return again and again. Avoidants don't return because they want you. They return because you became a question that was never answered. And that uncertainty is haunting. They come back to check. Was what I felt real? Did that person actually touch something deeper in me? Or am I just overthinking? Their return is not a reconnection. It's a retest of an emotion that was never finished. But ironically, the more they test, the less certain they become. Because avoidants don't naturally trust their emotional cues. The more they analyze, the more they sink into confusion. And so you stay alive in their mind not because of what you did, but because they never figured out what you meant. They never allowed themselves to feel deeply enough to define it. But they can't fully dismiss you either. So you remain like an unfinished file, not deleted, not sorted, just left open. And files like that always reopen when they're lonely, nostalgic, or when someone new can't quite fill the space you once did. Avoidants don't fear losing you through actions. They fear that the vague feeling you left behind might never disappear. And that's what keeps you alive in them, not through presence, but as a memory they can't name, yet can't escape. 5. They need to know who's really in control, not of love, but of position. At the core of avoidant attachment, the issue is not love, it's control. For avoidance, intimacy isn't just connection, it's a situation that must be managed to avoid emotional vulnerability. They don't fear caring, they fear losing the upper hand once feelings get too real. So when you withdraw first, you're not just walking away. You're interrupting a script. They've quietly written one where they decide when to get close, when to step back, and when to reconnect. Avoidants tend to manage the relationship dynamic by regulating distance. They move back when they feel pressured and return when it feels safe. This rhythm isn't always conscious. It's a nervous system trying to stay emotionally safe, shaped by early experiences where love felt risky or inconsistent. But when you go silent, you take that rhythm away. You stop dancing to their tempo. You don't chase when they pull. You don't wait in the emotional hallway for them to return. And this, more than anything, triggers their sense of lost control. If I'm not the one coming back, am I losing my place in this connection? If they left without protest, am I no longer the one in control? A 2015 study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that avoidantly attached individuals maintain control by avoiding situations that trigger emotional dependence. When the other person exits the dynamic without drama, avoidants often return not to bond, but to reclaim their perceived role of dominance. That's why they come back. Not because they love you, not because they realized your worth, but because your silence challenged their position in the emotional system. You used to be the one waiting, hoping, holding space. Now you're not there. You didn't slam the door, but you stopped standing in it. You're not chasing. You're not reacting, and you're not leaving emotional breadcrumbs for them to follow. That destabilizes their structure. They don't know who they are to you anymore. You moved from being emotionally manageable to emotionally sovereign. And avoidants who rely on being the one to modulate closeness now feel disoriented, unsure who's holding the rein. They return not to reconnect, but to reclaim their steering wheel. Like someone used to driving, now realizing the car keeps going without them. That's the feeling they can't tolerate. So they reach out, not lovingly, but strategically. A casual message, a vague question, an empty check-in. It's not about emotion, it's about ego and control. So don't misread their return as renewed interest. Sometimes, they don't want you, they just want the version of you that once fit neatly into their emotional control system. And if you don't notice that difference, you'll step into an invisible game. You'll think they're coming back for intimacy, but they're just trying to put you back where they felt safest under their quiet control. They check the old door not to enter, but to see if it's still open. When an avoidant person reappears after a long silence, don't assume it's a sign of growth. Sometimes, they're not coming back to reconnect, they're just checking. Specifically, they ping you. A meaningless message like, "How've you been?" A story like, a vague comment. These aren't gestures of renewed interest, they're quiet probes. Is the door still open? Do I still affect them? Because for avoidance, the fear isn't losing you. It's losing their ability to make you respond. This is their way of reassuring themselves that if they ever wanted to return, they could. Deep down, they want to retain access, even if they never plan to use it. It's like keeping the keys to an old house they no longer live in just in case. If you respond even politely, they relax. I still matter to them. Then, they vanish again. Not because you did anything wrong, but because their mission is complete. They confirmed that they still had emotional access. In attachment theory, this behavior is known as proximity, seeking with emotional distance. They seek just enough closeness to gauge your reaction, but not enough to truly reconnect. It's not about intimacy. It's about emotional surveillance. They don't want you. They want proof you haven't fully left. Because their deepest fear isn't separation. It's losing emotional control over someone they once influenced. And when you don't react, it unsettles them. Your silence sends a message they weren't prepared for. That door might really be closed now. At that point, they'll either fully disappear and seek new validation elsewhere, or intensify their signals not out of love, but from fear of losing their grip on you. The avoidance return is often just a knock, not a step inside. And if you don't recognize that, you'll misread it. You'll hope, you'll open your heart, but the moment they confirm the door is still open, they leave. Because their goal was never to stay. Their goal was to see if you'd still answer. And when you learn to not respond, not out of resentment, but from respect for your own emotional peace, you don't just break their pattern. You force them to face a deeper question within themselves. Why do I need someone to still be affected by me to feel worthy? Here's something you need to hold close. Avoidants don't come back because they've changed. They come back because they can't accept how you ended things. Can't accept that you walked away without asking. Can't accept that they're no longer in control of the narrative. Every act of return, whether through words or calculated silence, is not about intimacy. It's about reclaiming a sense of power they feel they lost. And if you're not grounded, you might confuse their hunger for control with real love. Ask yourself, are they coming back to build something, or just to reclaim the role they used to play in my life? That question is your compass. Because sometimes what you need is not someone to come back, but your own ability to not need them to return anymore. You're allowed to miss them. You might have loved deeply. You may have lost yourself trying to hold on. But if you're here now, calm enough to observe, wise enough to pause, then you are already doing what they often cannot. Face your feelings, name them, choose your own ending. Hold on to that. Because real love doesn't require you to win back control. It requires you to know when to release and still carry your dignity with you.